Another great show lined up for you just as we approach the Christmas break. We are talking about the Emergencies Act, what it means. Did we meet that threshold? Did the Government of Canada meet that threshold to invoke the most serious, the most powerful piece of legislation the Government of Canada has in its arsenal? Also talk about C-21. Amazing new developments in the firearms legislation that the Liberals are trying to sneak through the committee process and into Parliament. We're going to talk about that in just a second. To do that, bring on some amazing voices, good friends of the show. We have Glenn Motz, Member of Parliament for Medicine Hat, Karsten Warner, in the beautiful province of Alberta. Also Larry Brock, Member of Parliament for Brantford Brant, a good friend of the show. And that stare he has, if you ever watch him in committee on social media, check it out, his social media page, that stare. Okay, Dave Stewart, if you remember him, the Blue Jays pitcher, he played for other players. I remember him as a Blue Jay. When he got into the zone, that stare he gave the batters would run a chill through their spine. And Larry Brock has that stare. So check it out in his committee work. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Great to be here, Jamie.
There's been a lot going on. Again, we talked about this on many shows before. Glenn, you were on. Larry, too. We had Raquel Dancho, the public safety critic, talking about, did the Government of Canada meet that threshold to invoke the Emergencies Act? And really, what we're doing is, it's not a matter of whether or not you agreed with the convoy or not. It was whether or not this government or future governments can use this tool for a process like this.
Right. And, you know, Larry and I have the distinct privilege and responsibility to serve on that special joint committee with senators and members of Parliament to look at that and whether the threshold was met and to ensure that no government again can invoke it under the same circumstance. And, you know, and as you look at it, the Act, the Emergencies Act had some very specific requirements. It had to meet the threshold of a national a threat to Canada's security as defined in Section 2 of the CSIS Act. And you know, there's legal pundits, there's many people who've provided evidence on this committee, and I don't believe that threshold was met. And then we've now been, since the commission, the Rouleau Commission, we've been given this new information that the government relied on a broader interpretation of the legislation. It's like, well, the law is pretty clear. Here's the defined line. As a government, you must follow the law. And they found a broader interpretation, which they say give them that authority to invoke it. However, Canadians, we haven't seen that specific legal opinion that they relied on. And I think that's problematic. Canadians deserve transparency. We haven't seen that through this process.
But didn't the government try to change the definition in their minds, kind of reread into that whole, it was there in print, but they kind of put their own spin on things. You heard Mendocino and Lametti talk about that.
As I explained to you on a previous podcast, Jamie, and thank you for your kind invitation to appear on this special show. And the purpose behind this is really to educate those Canadians, in my view, that feel that this was an occupation that had to end. Whether or not it ended lawfully, whether it ended in a dangerous setting precedent, doesn't really matter to almost 2/3 of the Canadians that are following this. Yeah. And I want them to realize that there is a greater implication of having that particular attitude. And this all goes back to the evidence that we have heard on this committee. There is nothing so far that we have reviewed, nothing that we have heard by way of testimony that it would seem to indicate that there was a legal basis for the invocation of this particular act. And that's important to me given my legal background. Mm-hmm. And it was important obviously to Justice Rouleau in the commission. If you recall when Justice David Lametti testified, he was being less than transparent, he was being less than open, and in fact wouldn't even admit to the existence of a legal opinion. Now, this Liberal government in 2015 promised Canadians, and in fact I remember watching Prime Minister Justin Trudeau look straight into the camera and promise Canadians that his government would be the most open and transparent and accountable government this country has ever seen. When you hide behind a legal opinion that your own lawyers were directed to provide to the government to justify the invocation of the act, and you do not supply that to Canadians in support of what legal rationale there was is extremely troubling to me. It was troubling to the commission inquiry lawyers. It was troubling to Justice Rouleau. And in fact, it was one of the inquiry lawyers who actually put it out there in a statement in the inquiry that this is not about transparency when you hide behind a legal opinion that us Canadians don't deserve to see. A just trust us attitude does not suffice when you are dealing with the most heavy-handed, most powerful legal remedy that any government could have over its citizens. The suppression of civil rights, the suppression of the ability to be secure of unreasonable search and seizure with respect to your bank accounts and investments, the right for peaceful assembly, the right to have freedom of speech, were all curtailed by this Liberal government's invocation of the Act. And you got to take a step back, in my view, Jamie, and ask yourself, take a look at all of the, excuse me, all of the examples of some real life emergencies, some dangerous emergencies that this country has faced in the last close to 40 years. And no government ever used that method of last resort. We heard our Prime Minister talking, this was a tool of last resort. In our view, by lowering that legal threshold, it's no longer a method of last resort. What other current or future emergency could there be where any future government, we do not want to normalize it. In our view, it sets a very dangerous precedent.
And thank you, Larry. Well said. One of the things that this government has shown the Canadian public is they can't be trusted. And the invocation of this act under these circumstances, I think, just create further distrust and division in this country. And we need to, we need to ensure that the Canadian public has trust in our institutions again. And that is not something that this act is providing comfort around to Canadians. Even we had at our last meeting several weeks ago, we had some academics who were there, and each of them said, "Listen, without seeing this broader interpretation that the government say they relied upon to understand it, they don't believe the threshold was met as defined currently in law." And that's what government's supposed to do. They're supposed to follow the law. And here in this circumstance, I'm quite troubled that the circumstances didn't quite meet the threshold, so they developed their own. And that's what it appears. And until we see it, people are left to believe what they want, and that is a challenge.
Yeah, to me, just looking from the outside, with not the backgrounds in law enforcement and the judicial side you do, Larry, there must be a reason why they're hiding it. It must not be good, I would think. But you can't.
I mean, the Emergencies Act was never intended to be invoked because of an inconvenience, because of incompetence, no matter where that lied, because people didn't want to hear you disagreed with a message. Like as Larry said at the front end, whether you agree with the convoy or not, the Emergencies Act is a measure that is last resort for the absolute security of a national threat to our country. That did not exist, in my opinion, and we haven't seen any evidence to suggest that it was.
Anything else you guys want to add before I flip over to the C-21 bill?
I think our position is very clear. We touched upon it in earlier podcasts, Jamie. I just ask Canadians just to keep an open mind, really follow this podcast, follow the work that my colleague and I, Glenn, are doing on the Emergencies Act Committee. We all look forward to the release of Justice Rouleau's commission report, and that may or may not continue or allow us to continue with the work that we're doing on the committee.
I agree. Excellent. All right, let's move over to C-21. A lot of developments have happened in the past few weeks. Liberals trying to sneak in an amendment during the committee process to circumvent Parliament during the first process and the first readings of it. And of course, you saw Carey Price, the Montreal Canadiens goalie, who came out against these amendments. And of course, he committed the mortal sin, which is to go against the left. And now the media and the pilers on are all over him. I think his message was right. He's not a criminal. He loves his country. He loves the sport and the pastime of hunting. And of course, he spoke up. And now the articles are, we should not retire Carey Price's jersey as a Montreal Canadian. This whole leftist pile-on is happening over an issue of the Liberal government once again trying to sneak around and punish those who enjoy the sport of hunting.
You know, what's troubling about this particular bill on C-21, we all saw it, and it was brought to the House, and it was the Liberal government's attempt to improve public safety. We would all agree that we will do and work with all of our colleagues in the House to actually improve public safety. Excuse me, but Bill C-21, as was introduced and debated in the House of Commons, was about a handgun freeze, about curtailing the use of handguns, red flag laws, all those things to try and keep the public safe from handguns. It then got to committee a couple weeks ago, and at committee we were prepared to do a clause by clause to wrap up and submit the report to government. And what did the Liberals do? They put in 46 amendments to their own bill, and then they introduced a brand new definition of what a prohibited firearm was to try and define, a definition of a military-style assault weapon that they had used from May of 2020, a handgun ban or a gun ban. They introduced it at the 11th and a half hour as we're going through this, and Section G of that particular Amendment 4 was all about redefining prohibited weapons to include long guns, shotguns, anything with a center fire cartridge that is capable of firing semi-automatic, that the gun is capable of holding a magazine that can accommodate more than 5 rounds. Well, in Canada, most hunting rifles their magazines are pinned to 5. It's illegal. It's a prohibited device to have a magazine with more than 5 rounds in it. And again, what are they trying to do? By adding this now into legislation, it has caused an uproar across the hunting community. Before, it was the sport shooters. It was the airsoft. It was the paintballers. It was those the Olympic shooters. Those are the people that were really concerned with C-21 and had huge concerns. There's also very many women's groups who said that the red flag laws were useless because we already had laws to deal with it. So the Liberals were already under the gun from the previous iteration of C-21, and now they throw in hunters and more sport shooters and farmers under the bus, and it makes no sense. There is no evidence to show that this targeting of hunters will have any impact on public safety. We've always said, and the government prides itself, they say we are evidence-based decision makers. However, there's no evidence to support what they've done. I think it's the other way around. It's decision-based evidence making. That's what they're doing here. And it makes no sense. They rightly so. The Canadian hunters in this country, hunting groups, outfitters, farmers and ranchers from across our country are very concerned that they're going to be administrative criminals overnight because of misguided approach to public safety. And our colleague Raquel Doncho, our public safety critic, has done an admirable job of, and those of us on committee and our colleagues of bringing this issue to light. And Canadians just need to step up and let their feelings be known. You get a hold of Mendocino, get a hold of the Prime Minister and Liberal MPs from across the country, and let them know what you really think about this bill.
This is a full-on attack to the ability for hunters who've enjoyed this particular sport, who enjoyed this particular activity to feed their families for as long as this country has been in existence. And what I find very disturbing, given your portfolio and my portfolio as shadow cabinet ministers, is that this is a full-on attack to Indigenous communities. And I just read a report this morning in preparation for this podcast, Jamie, that indicated that a spokesperson for a number of Indigenous leaders across this nation who were here in Ottawa last week for a 3-day conference indicated that the RCMP in some parts of the north are already seizing, before this is even passed, seizing rifles and seizing handguns that many in the northern parts of this country are using for traditional hunting purposes. This is a full-on attack to the treaty rights that Indigenous leaders and hunters have enjoyed in this country for decades. So it's not only impacting Canadians, it's impacting those relationships that we have with our Indigenous nations.
Absolutely. I think this is waking up people who normally don't pay attention to this kind of stuff, don't care either way, but I think when it comes to actually going a step too far, right? I think many people want the shootings by gangs to stop. Is this the correct method to do that? We have said for a long time, no, this is not going to stop one shooting. It sadly is going to continue until you look at the criminals. But in the government sides, it's easier to go after the law-abiding citizen because they're going to follow the law regardless. They might gripe about it, they might feel that they're being infringed upon, but they're going to follow the law.
It's lazy government. Seriously, you look at
it is lazy government.
You look at the crime stats since this government has come in to be in 2015 have escalated. Violent crime is up for a multitude of reasons. Gang crime is up. The focus is misguided. Let's target those who want to get into gangs, and there's great movements across the country that can work to keep kids out of gang life. Let's deal with the smuggled firearms. Our police services are telling us across the country that the majority of the crime guns being used are smuggled in from the United States, and they are not. The legal firearm owners in this country have never been the problem. Let's focus on the holes in our border, get CBSA some resources and some joint force work, and let's focus on our gangs and those who commit crimes in our communities, not those who are lawful Canadians already.
It's important to remember that if you have a firearms license, specifically even a restricted firearms, which allows you to possess a handgun, there's only two places you can take it, really. The range or home.
Yes.
Maybe the gunsmith. Sometimes they're the same. But also, your name is run through the police data bank every single day. And when I took my course, I was told it's like being on parole.
Yep.
You're on parole for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a privilege to. I'm a PAL and an RPAL holder, and I consider it a privilege to have gone through the course, to learn about it, and then have a huge responsibility to be able to possess a non-restricted and restricted firearm. And that's how Canadians are. Canadians who follow the rules will follow them already, on those law-abiding. But as you said, there's a misguided approach to target the wrong. The focus is wrong here, and let's focus on those who cause problems in our country, not those who don't.
Well, let's talk to Larry about the judicial side. C-75 piece of legislation, many at home probably won't know that, some might. Other pieces of legislation basically creating a revolving door style justice system.
To put it bluntly, criminals, the thugs, those individuals who on a daily basis jeopardize community and public safety from coast to coast to coast are laughing in the face of this Prime Minister and this woke liberal government, who on the one hand is trying to introduce legislation that is designed to improve public safety, to increase our confidence that we can go out in our community and not be, hit by a stray bullet, things of that nature. And they do the complete opposite with their policies. Bill C-75, a classic example. Bill C-5, which Justice Lametti was taking a victory lap and applauding himself, patting himself on the back and saying how great this is for this country, is doing the complete opposite, is sending the wrong message to those individuals who will continue to put public safety at risk. They are soft on crime. They've been soft on crime since being elected in 2015. This particular bill is not going to improve it.
And there's some major offenses in some of this pieces of legislation that just have house arrest as a potential punishment.
We're talking about individuals who are importing, who are exporting, who are using firearms in the commission of the offense, the drive-by shooters, those who are using weapons to commit robberies. These individuals now have received a grace from the government that despite whatever criminal record they may have, sometimes it's very similar in nature, that a very crafty and clever defense lawyer can now make an argument that a penitentiary sentence is no longer warranted in the unique circumstances of this offender. Maybe they'll draw upon life experiences and some of the struggles and challenges this individual had, that notwithstanding the gravity of the offense and the moral responsibility of the offender, which are key elements in a judge's mind when sentencing, now has the ability to argue for house arrest. We have a classic example is the drug traffickers, the importers, the exporters, the producers of very dangerous substances such as fentanyl, which is killing Canadians on a daily basis. No community is immune from the dangers of fentanyl, and now they've been granted the luxury of making an argument, and depending on who your judge is, maybe convincing a judge that they ought to serve their sentence, which is 2 years less 1 day, if a conditional sentence is granted, to serve that in the comfort of their own home. Well, let's not forget what these traffickers were doing. They were trafficking in their own home, right? So it simply allows them to continue the trade. There's absolutely zero punishment, there's no deterrence. These individuals are laughing directly in the face of this Prime Minister. And it's disgusting.
Jamie, you mentioned a comment about the revolving door of justice.
Yes.
And Larry is a former prosecutor and I in law enforcement. When we started our careers, we looked at the Bail Reform Act, and it was pretty simple. The Crown's responsibility, first offense, was to show why the accused should be remanded in custody. And any offense thereafter, while they were on judicial interim release, the accused, it was the responsibility of the accused, the onus was on them to show why they should be released. Well, that whole process is turned upside down. So that's why you have people who get offense after offense after offense, they keep getting out on bail. And it's a backward system. So the Bail Reform Act has failed Canadians. And it continues to fail in public safety. So if there's an area where we think it can be improved, is to make sure the onus is back on the criminal why they should be released from custody if they continue to be a danger to the public.
Which opens up the possibility, and I'm toying with this idea of creating a private member's bill to really seriously look at bail issues as it relates to those individuals who are involved in serious gun crime. In much the same way that there are special provisions for those charged with murder, treason, things of those nature, really serious offenses, given the frequency and the severity of these crimes, I think it's time to relook at that opportunity of placing a very restricted view of bail to ensure that it does not appear in front of a justice of the peace, but rather a superior court justice to fully weigh the risk to the community. So that's something I'm going to be looking at in the new year.
Okay, perfect. We've run over time. We do this on every show. I don't know why we don't ask for more time. But final comments, as you know, we always give the guests the final word. Guest Glenn, you're sitting next to me, so you go first.
Well, sure. First of all, it's great to use the blueprint as one of the vehicles we can to get a very strong public safety message out there. And thank you for the work that you do. It's been a privilege working with Larry on this Emergencies Act committee, and it's amazing. The focus that we want, as Larry so eloquently articulated, was we want to ensure that the Canadian public understands what the role of government should be, and that's to keep their citizens safe and to ensure that, on the Emergencies Act side, to ensure that there is no possibility for a government to use the Emergencies Act in this circumstance again against its people. And on the C-21 side, Conservatives will continue to be the voice of common sense when it comes to firearms and keeping Canadians safe and going after those that continue to victimize in our communities.
Larry?
I couldn't have said it better.
The man of few words today. All right.
Succinct, fulsome, Canadians need to be informed.
Yeah.
This is one avenue to do that, and we really thank you for the opportunity of sharing our views on these two key issues.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I enjoyed the conversation. So we have Larry Brock, Member of Parliament for Brantford-Brant. We also have Mr. the one and only Glenn Motts, Medicine Hat Carsters-Warner. We appreciate both of their time. We appreciate your time as well. Did you like the message? It's probably something you're not hearing in the mainstream media, so we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, share this program. New content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can download and listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. It's all out there for you to enjoy and your friends to enjoy. Have a great Christmas. Have a great holiday with friends and family. Happy New Year as well. Until then, our next episode. Low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.
Merry Christmas.